And we're live.
Good morning. Welcome. This is it the third or is it the fourth retreat you've done during lockdowns?
Fourth, including the Swedish one.
Yeah. So we've just been trying to run these for people during these times, and we've been doing it via donation. We're quite aware that for some people, times are quite challenging. And so we'd like to make this as accessible for everybody as possible. What we ask is that this is mine and Jenny's job. This is what we do for a living. And so we make these via donation so that they become accessible. So those that can afford to pay, do so if they can. And those that are really struggling, what we ask is if they could just do an act of kindness for another person or a group of people or something, do an act of kindness for people, bring something beautiful into this world. And we'd also love to hear about them. One person got in touch with us and told us what they'd done in exchange, which was a really, really beautiful thing. So we're really, really thankful to hear that. And so that's why we've started to run this, and we're even considering running Freedom Thinking as a via donation company as we move through the time at the moment, as we move through these challenging times. But yeah, so this is the third then, isn't it? It's the third via donation retreat we've run since the UK started to go into lockdown. And we're putting these out, they're recorded. So anybody who's got people that perhaps couldn't make it today, but perhaps might be interested, please feel free to pass on the links. We've got some fantastic guest speakers alongside Jenny and myself. We've got Dr. Dicken Bettinger, we've got Elsie Spittle, and we've got Bill and Linda Pettit as well. So that'll be spread out over the next 3 days. So we want this to be, so do you want to read the itinerary?
For today?
Yeah. So this is how today's roughly looking.
Yes, each day is slightly different just to accommodate the different speakers and time zones. So please check the itinerary because it won't be the same every single day. So today will be 10 till 11:30 is kind of an introduction to ourselves and the principles. And then we'll have a break from 11:30 till 11:45. And then 11:45 to 12:30, it'll be Dave and I talking about, could it really be that simple? Because the title for today, we've put simplicity. And I know that's something that Sydney Banks really wanted people to realise about life. And then after lunch, which will be from 12:30 till 2, we'll have questions, observations and reflections. And we really want that to be interactive, where everybody on the screen can share if they want to, ask questions, tell us their insights or observations or things they've noticed. So that's when we kind of try and shut up a bit and listen to you. And then from 3:15 till 3:30, we've got break. And these are all UK times. I'm really sorry for people in other countries. Yeah. And then from 3:30 till 4:30, we've got Dr. Dicken Bettinger, who's just one of our favourite people ever. And I've just called that Coming Home because that's the title of his amazing book. But I've said to him, he's free to talk about whatever's fresh and new for him. And I know that he's always very open to having questions from people. So that's 3:30 till 4:30.
Yeah, each day we're starting at 10 o'clock. So it'll be 10 o'clock UK time that we'll be starting each day. But each day finishes slightly differently. Yeah, so tomorrow finishes 5:30. And on Monday, it finishes at 6:45. We've got Linda and Elsie speaking in the afternoon. So it's going to be quite a late finish, but people generally come in and come out as they go through the day. So, but please feel free to stay for the whole thing. Just be comfortable. What we do ask is, if you are new to this, try and set aside the time to be here. This is quite it's a very, how can I put this? It's a concept for which many people are not familiar. This type of learning. And it's not a learning done through memory. This is a very different kind of learning. It's a learning which we were never taught at school. It's a learning that isn't really celebrated so much because it's not really recognized so much. It's coming. It's certainly coming. But it's a learning that takes place within our own being as we start to unravel. And that's what the 3 principles were all about. This morning, to begin with, before the first break, we just want to talk a bit about the 3 principles. So this is a very different kind of learning. It's one that isn't so much found in mental agitation and
grasping and trying.
Yeah, and graft. It's very much the opposite. This is very much found in quiet.
And in some ways, it's the most natural way that we learn. Like if you look at young babies, how easily they learn and evolve and change. Like it's inbuilt in us to be learners and to evolve. And I think the principles in a way is kind of allowing our minds to quieten enough to put aside everything else we've learned and actually listen fresh. Because young babies don't seem to have all these agendas and ideas and listening through concepts. They just listen and learn, and they learn language. Like wherever they're born, whatever language they're around, that's the language that they then learn. They don't have to actively learn, they just learn. So you see that actually all of us are natural learners. And what Sydney Banks uncovered with the 3 principles is what's natural to us. So in some ways, people can find that hard because they're so used to learning for information or learning to write something down or take something away. Whereas this is learning in the very natural way that we're built for, but we've kind of covered up over time because we've got very, very heady.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I want to set this out at the very, very beginning. If you come with a thing in mind that you want sorting out over this next 3 days, please just get up, walk out to the back door, just leave it outside, shut the door and come and sit back down. Okay, if you come here with a specific problem that you want to see something about, please park it. I ask that, and it sounds completely and utterly counterintuitive. Well, why the hell would I be here then? Because we want to talk about something deeper. We want to talk about something more important. And I know that can sound quite rough because, Dave, do you know what? You don't even know what my problem is. I just ask, could you please trust us and park it? As long as we come with an agenda, that's all we'll listen through. We'll listen through that agenda. We'll listen for when they're going to talk about this, when they're going to talk about this. And at that point, we're not listening. Yeah, I hear what you said. Just, can you get to this point? We're not listening. It's not in that. What we're truly looking for is not in that. The problem is something that we've learned. It's in nothing that we've learned. If it's something that we've learned, then we'd already know it. Okay, this is going beyond and before, preceding awakening to a deeper point where problems suddenly become realized for what they truly are. All problems. So yeah, if you come with any pre-ideas, any agendas, any things that you really kind of, whatever it be, please could you just park it, just leave it outside, just during these days. You can pick it up later on, you can go back to it if you really, really want to go back to it, you can. But I just want to really stress that point right at the beginning, because so many people come to us, they've come with whatever problem it is, and they're not listening. And what we're talking about is something that can solve problems, solve all problems.
And yeah, we've done, like we said, 2 other retreats, and we've done kind of quite long introductions to ourselves. So we are going to keep it brief today. And I can send out a link to the previous retreat where we didn't keep it brief if people wanted to know a bit more about us. But I'm Jenny, and together with Dave, we have Freedom Thinking. 16 years ago, almost, I think end of May, it will be 16 years since I came across the principles through Dr. Roger Mills and a lady called Margaret Opio. And I thought then that I'd kind of awakened to something, and I kind of knew the truth. And the strange thing is it definitely, I scratched the surface of something. And then over the last 16 years, it's like it's been more and more revealed to me. And I've loved that, because there is no end to learning this. There is no end to the depth of understanding that was pointed to by Sydney Banks. And for myself, it's been the initial, I said it was like an unraveling or a falling away of everything I thought I knew about myself. Everything I believed to be true. I kind of went on a 3-day training with these incredible teachers, and then kind of left feeling like all of those things had fallen away. And what was left was a space of potential. And I think so many of those things I'd been scared to give up, because it felt like there might be like a void or a vast nothingness. And I was kind of clinging on to who I thought I was because I thought it kept me safe. And I went to those 3 days without an agenda. I didn't think it'd be possible for me to change. I just went really to spend a bit of time with my sister, who I hadn't seen for a long time. And I say it's almost like I was sideswiped, because suddenly how it was described as like this raising consciousness or insight had just been gifted to me. And I wasn't left with empty space. I was left with this just brand new thought of anything's possible. And so sometimes we hold on to what we know because we think, or at least I know this, and the unknown seems quite scary to us. But the truth is that we're always in the unknown. Like if you'd asked any of us, I'm sure, maybe a year and a half ago, will we be in a time where we have to wear masks, where there's this virus that's gone across the globe? I don't think any of us would have thought that would actually happen. And some of the things happening in the world right now, but we all kind of go along as if we think we know something and we feel secure in that. And I feel like what the principles offers is a deeper security, because it's a security that isn't dependent on what's happening in the world, or even health, or relationships, or money. It's a far deeper security that isn't of this world of form. It's a security that's from the knowledge of what we're built from, of our nature. And I think that's a very different place to find security. Because I know before coming across this, a lot of my security came from avoiding certain situations, or being with certain people, or trying to look a certain way. And all of those things, like if you think your security comes from those things, you're going to be at sea, because it's always moving, it's always changing, and you can't control everything. And you feel stressed because you're then at the mercy of a world. And I think what happened on those 3 days in May 2005 was I touched that space within me that isn't dependent on anything. And I knew that that space within me was also the space that's within all life. So in that way, I felt completely connected, or part of, like we often say the word connected is as if you could be disconnected, but I'd felt disconnected. And suddenly I was like plugged back in to life. And I see that that's where, when people start to feel that again and realize that, they know how to navigate their own life. They know how to manage issues or things that come up. And if someone had told me beforehand, you're going to go on a course and learn about something that afterwards you can't put into words. And when people question you, you don't really know what you heard, but you're going to feel completely kind of free and open. I would not have thought that was possible. I think being around this, and with the Three Principles movies site, myself and my ex-husband Rudy got to travel the world and see people learning this from all walks of life, all kinds of stories, all kinds of characters. And anyone who is touched by this kind of can't put it into words. They can't really explain it. But it's something that you can see when someone comes alive with it, because they're kind of looking for the words, but there aren't the words in the human language for this. Because as soon as we're into the words, we're into creation. Because language is something that's been developed. And it's an incredible, incredible tool. But we can also listen to where the language is trying to point us. And I was saying to you before, like, I almost lost faith in that for a while after being around the principles a few years, because I heard so many incredible speakers who would just talk about it in a way that I was like, I could never talk about it like that. They're so profound, or they're so eloquent, or they're so this. And I started thinking about my words and thinking about my stories and wanting to come across and wanting to teach it simply, or wanting to teach it this way. And I lost faith in the fact that this message transcends language. It really, really does. And when I started to remember that again, the impact of courses and trainings changed. Because where I was coming from was a place that this is already true and people already have it within them. And all I have to do is try and remind them and remind myself and speak from that place. So I know that on the first 3 days of me learning about this, and Roger was kind of trying to explain, listen to this like you're listening to music. He said, when you're listening to music, most of the time, you're not listening for the lyrics or the tempo or even what instruments. You just you're listening for the fullness of it. And I was sat there thinking, what the hell is he talking about? But now I know a bit more. I see what he was trying to get us to do. Because often when we sit down listening to music, we're not listening to music to try and fix our problems, or we don't really have an agenda. We just listen to music that we like and we enjoy. It's Rusty sneezing.
You can hear Rusty, yeah.
So it's almost, this 3 days is about, you can just sit back and relax. You don't have to take notes. It really is so much simpler than we think.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Elleray, and I'm the other half of Freedom Thinking with Jen. Yeah, likewise, don't want to go too far into too much of my story, but it was one of depression, anger, hostility, anxiety, and lots and lots of worry. And in 2012, I had a big breakdown in my life. Found myself quite isolated. And it was during this time I felt like an emergence within myself. I remember seeing counselors and psychologists and telling them that I feel like I'm becoming spiritual. And they were like, what do you mean by that? I don't know. Because Dave at that time was a hard man. He was a tree surgeon. He was an angry lad. He was somebody who really had a lot of investment in size, bulk, weight, strength, the ability to intimidate. And in 2013, I was introduced to Sydney Banks through a lady called Sue Huginson, one of my best friends. She wasn't at the time. She was a therapist I'd seen 6 months before. Before that moment, I'd saw her 6 months before that moment once. But she got in touch with me. And long story short, through what I would have called at that time a miracle, but what I am gaining more and more respect for the fact that we are only scratching the surface of consciousness. I was then introduced to Sid Banks by Sue. It took me 9 weeks until one day I listened to Sue for 9 weeks, and one day she gave me a right arse kicking. And she told me that I must listen to Sid. Why have you never listened to Sid? Why have you never done anything I've asked you to do? She was right to ask me that question. She was right to be upset. I listened to Sid and went for a walk. And it was on this walk where I can't describe what happened. It was an experience of something to this day I look back at, I can remember, I can't describe. But it changed my life and it changed the world, which was quite a telling point. The fact that it changed the world in front of my eyes. I saw a new world. About May, June, July, August, 4 months before that, I had another experience up in Scotland after being in a fight, which again awoke me to some. This was a different kind of experience, similar but different. That one in Scotland, I would say was deeper. It was the revelation of inexplicable divine love. Funnily enough, that one didn't change my life, insofar as it didn't get rid of my depression and my anger and my anxieties and my habits. But what it did wake me up to was the realization that I could ask for things to come into the world and they would turn up. It was a new kind of way of being after that moment. Once I realized I could ask for things, prayer, you could say, you could call it prayer. I wasn't praying to a God. I'm not religious. I'm not a religious man. I've got respect for religion. I've got respect for biblical teachings and teachings of awakened people. But through the combination of those two experiences, and then from then going on in my life, and what is it now? Is this 8 years later? 2000, I think this is the 8th year. It's been an unraveling and a revealing of depth, insight, realization of connection, realization that things are not what they appear to be. Life is not what it appears to be. Reality is not what it appears to be. And it's in the unraveling of these illusions that we start to gain a deeper respect for what is true. What is true applies to all people. It doesn't matter what your history. It doesn't matter what your beliefs. If you are religious, if you're atheist, if you consider yourself to be spiritual or not, it doesn't care. This is a conversation for all people. And Jen and I have had the privilege of traveling to many different places ourselves, and you've gone beyond the work you and I have done, and with Rude, and you've gone to many other places, and we've been able to speak to all different cultures, people from very different social backgrounds to ourselves. And we've had the privilege to see people wake up in all of these places, even through language barrier, through translation, to watch somebody's face light up with insight, and then to have translated back what they're saying and hearing the words that they're saying. has been an absolute gift. And what I said right at the beginning of when I was saying, please, if you do come with a problem, please just park it. Just forget about that for now. Forget about it. I remember being in a township and standing up, people probably heard this bit before, but standing in a township with about 30 people in this room and asking them for their problems. Tell me your problems. I didn't know how to start this particular 3-day event. So I was like, oh, let's go for that. And I stood up and I said, give me your problems. And big whiteboard paper, like 4 pages of problems came out. And these were problems that when I looked at them, I shit myself. Like things that I felt completely
ill-equipped.
Yeah, totally ill-equipped to be able to deal with things like my daughter's a prostitute, my son's been murdered, I'm harbouring my nephew from the police and gangsters, my kids are on drugs, all these things. Then there was things like your business and racism and contracts, and insecurity about the future, and 4 pages worth of things. And then we went back to it on day 3, this list. We didn't address any of those problems. We just spoke about the nature of life. And then when we went back to these things, right at the end of the day, I remember standing there and looking, and many of these things already had lines put through. And then as we went around the room, said, whose was this? Whose was this? They would speak up and go, oh no, that's not a problem now. No, you can put a line through that. Or we've had an idea. We've had a discussion about this. Put a line through it. Every single one of those things got a line put through it. And I remember standing there and realizing the route to solving problems is not by staring at problems. It's by allowing ourselves to fall into a space where problems and answers become one. Your problem will become solved from the same place where it emerged from in the first place, within yourself. You have the answer to every single question. You're built from it. We're so attached to our ideas of who we think we are, what we think we are. We're so attached to this idea that we're a body and that's it. We're a brain. I don't really want to talk too much about brains. If you think when we're talking about mind, we're talking about brain consciousness, we're talking about brain thought, we're talking about brain, please, I'm personally not. I want to talk about something that tells the brain what to do. What is it that tells neurons to fire? We're always looking at the neuron firing. Oh, a thought is the firing of a neuron. All right, very good. What's telling the neuron to fire? What's the intelligence behind the brain? We've spent an awful lot of time looking at the physical. It makes sense. It's logical, given the state of consciousness of humanity, where it's been at, the level of consciousness that humanity has been at. It's been very much one of the senses up until very recently, apart from for a few people. But this is starting to gather momentum right now. We've been at one of the senses where we believe that everything we see, hear, taste, touch, feel is a fact. We'll be breaking that down throughout these 3 days. But what we're now starting to bring in is, you could call it the secondary, but the primary, singular part of ourself, which is one of a more ethereal, more, I say the word spiritual, but it's so loaded. This other dimension of our being. It's starting to become aware of a new dimension within ourselves. It's always been there. We just haven't been able to see it. You don't see it with your eyes. You become aware of it. And when you become aware of it, It makes its presence known, and the awareness of its presence known by you start to feel different. Because this is nothing new. It's just the way things are for all people and for all beings. It's the most important point if we're going to move through these times. Now we're facing these new times that we're starting to face. It's the most important thing for people to start to uncover. Because when we start to uncover it, we start to find our own free will. We start to realize that the conditioning that we have perhaps believed to be reality is simply beliefs that people have told us, ideas that we've adopted, perhaps stuff that we've learned at school, what is possible, what is impossible, how this universe works, what biology is, what animals are, who you are, what you are. Perhaps psychology has given you labels and told you this is who you are, this is what you are now. We would really love it if people could just over this next 3 days sit back, open up their hearts and minds, consider the notion that everything they believe is perhaps not quite as it seems. There's liberation to be found. There's freedom to be found. It doesn't exist in the world events, doesn't the freedom? Lockdowns are not prisons. Prisons are not prisons. When I say that, I've been to prison. Nobody can imprison your mind. Nobody can imprison your consciousness. Your consciousness is something that is so untouchable. It's yours. It's your spark. People often hear me say this, but one of the first questions I love to ask people is, what is life? What is life? I'm having a hard life. Are you? Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, well, what is life if you're having a hard one of it? What is life? What is it to be alive? What is living? Like Jenny said, we're very quick to stare at the creations, what life is doing, without any questioning of what is life. What is life? What is life? Where does it come from? What's the deal with it? Here we all are. Every single one of us listening to this now will go, yeah, I'm living. Yeah, of course I'm living. But what is it? This is when we start to ask these questions. This is where we start to step before the problems. The problems are what are showing up in life, but what is life? You start to gain more perspective on that, or an individual starts to gain more perspective on that point. They will start to realize things that people cannot tell them, or perhaps people have been trying to tell them for a long time, but they couldn't hear.
Like you with exercise.
Like me with exercise, yeah. You know, we all come across these situations where we've become aware of something, so we try to tell other people, but they're not ready to hear. It could be quite easy then for us to, I call it foie gras in them, where you get your goose and you just ram it down the neck. Don't do that. Don't do that. I tried that. I didn't go so well. It alienated me. And my family didn't want anything to do with me. But what this ultimately is an awakening that we're talking about. What we're talking about is an awakening to what's true. This is a never-ending thing. There's always more to see. If you get arrogant and think that you've seen it all, I get this now, I understand the principles, perhaps I understand mind because I can relate that to like what's spoken about in Buddhism or this part of the Bible. Yeah, I understand that. No, you can't understand mind. Well, I get consciousness then. Consciousness is the awareness. It's like the light. It's the light. No, those are concepts. Those are the ego trying to grasp hold of something and believe it's intelligent and clever and knows something that you can then pass on. Well, I definitely understand thought. I get thought. That's the principle I understand. Do you? What's thought? What is thought? Do any of us truly know what the principles are? It's false security if we believe we do. It's not true security. It will trip us up. True security is found when we let go of all those things. It's the most counterintuitive thing I can possibly try to explain to people. I always believed that knowledge kept me safe. Knowledge in certain circumstances, yeah, can keep you safe if you know there's a rough part of town. And if I go there wearing a fancy handbag or nice watch or something,
as you often do,
as I often do, people who know me, you know, a little bit of knowledge used in the right way is awesome, fantastic. It's good to have the knowledge that you drive on the left-hand side of the road in the UK and on the right-hand side of the road on other in other countries. It's good to have that kind of knowledge. Not knocking knowledge, but it's gaining a respect for knowledge and understanding it, understanding its limitations, understanding when it starts to work against us. One of the parables I love in the Bible is the Garden of Eden story, when Eve consumed the original sin, when Eve consumed the fruit of the tree of knowledge. They were cast from paradise. They lived in a state of bliss, a state of paradise. The moment, very specific tree, the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the tree of death, as it was also known as. I think it's a really beautiful metaphor. When Eve consumed the fruit of the tree of death, when Eve consumed the fruit of the tree of knowledge, they were cast out of paradise. Before we started adopting ego, all the things we think we know, all the things we think that we know that keep us safe, all the identities, all the things we hold on to so tight, the things that we're reluctant to. I've let go of so much, but I'm not letting go of this bit because I know this bit keeps me safe. I can't let go of this bit. The beautiful thing about the Garden of Eden is you can always return to it. You're not cast out of it forever. You can enter back into the Garden of Eden, back into the paradise within your own being. That garden is nowhere other than within your own being. You can enter that at any time, the moment that we are prepared to just allow ourselves to be quiet. Bask in the present moment and start to find love and beauty. It's so simple. It sounds so ridiculously simple, but it is so ridiculously simple. But much of the time we're so wedded to our beliefs, even good beliefs. This is where, forgive me, this is where religion can really trip people up, because they're so, I can't let go of my religion. I'm scared to let go. I'll go to hell. Religion's a beautiful thing. It's about cultivating love. If you look at all religion, it's about cultivating love. That's the basis of all religions. It's about cultivating love and realizing God. Realizations of God do not take place outside of our being. They take place within our being. Anybody who is realized of God has realized it within themselves. They haven't realized it outside of themselves. You can't realize anything outside of yourself. Realizations take place within mind, within consciousness. So anybody who realizes source has realized it within, they found it within themselves. They found a hidden aspect of their being that wasn't visible on the day-to-day sensory plane. And that's what Sid's message was all about. He broke it down into the 3 principles. He didn't initially. That came with psychology. Principles came with when he started to work with psychologists, because he was aware that, well, psychologists are scientists really, and they like principles. Well, I've got these principles. But Sid's message was not a psychology. It's not a psychology. It's not a self-help thing. It's not a thing that you could put alongside CBT or NLP or anything like that. It doesn't work alongside anything, which is why he said you can't mix them. You can't mix hypnosis and the principles, and you can't do a little bit of the principles and NLP. No, you can't do the principles.
And he wasn't saying don't do any of those things.
No.
He was just making a distinction.
Yeah, he wasn't saying don't do them. He was saying they're totally different things. The principles are a description of how life works, and psychology at that point and to this moment is talking about the manipulation of what's evolved, what's come from the principles. The principles are foundational. They're words, they're a metaphor. Sid said himself, they're a metaphor for love. Because in the beginning is love. And all things are made from it. I don't know why. I've never understood that bit. But love is connecting, for want of a better word. I don't really like the word connecting. Because like Jen said, when you have the word connecting, like you take two and connect it. But that was never Sid's message. That was never the message of the enlightened or awakened people. The message of those people was everything is one state of being, showing up as many states of being. What is it they say in India and stuff like that, and Nepal and Thailand?
Advaita?
No, it wasn't that. It's
not two. One
something like a one state, 1,000. I can't remember now. Forgive me. But it was awakening to what everybody is. And when we start to awaken to that within ourselves, you start, Jenny said, you see it within other people and you recognize it within other people. And as people start to awaken to this love within themselves, it's just a feeling, it's a state of being. Some people have massive epiphanies. And some people drip, drip, drip. Doesn't matter. Truly, it doesn't matter. You're here forever. Not in this form. But what we're talking about wasn't something that was ever born or died. We're always looking at the form when it comes to birth and death. I remember seeing my uncle when he died. God bless him. Uncle Malcolm struggled for a lot of months. He was in a lot of pain. He was unconscious for his last 2 days. And I went to saw him, and when he had passed, he had a big smile on his face. We're talking about something which will shatter our ideas of what life is, what permanence is, what impermanence is, what is possible, what is impossible.
I wanted to say earlier, actually, it's I can see that one of the things that limited me was this idea that I could never see as deep as Sid, or there'd be certain teachers that would share and I'd think, wow, I don't think I could ever see as deep as you. And you can see that we've created this idea that there's wise people or spiritual leaders who, you know, we need them to guide us. But I feel like really what Sid was trying to say to us is we are all the same. We're all born from the same place. We all have access to the same ultimate knowledge of source. And it can be really easy to create hierarchies in our mind and limitations for ourselves of what's possible. And I have no idea what's going to be revealed within me or can be revealed in somebody else. But I know that there's been times where I've been working with people where in that moment they become my teacher because they just see something so profound and they share in a way that you know they've touched that space. And you get humbled by it. And I think that's the beauty of this. Anybody here on this call could see something so profound, so simple, so deep that it blows anything that I think I've seen out the water in a way. And it isn't about how much we've seen or haven't, but it just don't limit yourself to what you think is possible for you. Well, I'm this kind of person. This is probably just, I'll probably be able to see a little bit. Oh, I'll be one of those drip, drip, drip people.
No.
Or, oh, I want to be one of those people that has like the big aha. Any of those are concepts and ideas that kind of color our view. And I think the simplicity in it is that all of us would have experienced moments where everything we think we know, our character just kind of disappears, even if it's just been for a second, where we've been lost in the beauty of something or filled with excitement about life for no reason. You're just filled with something. Or you've suddenly just noticed the way the light catches in the trees and you're kind of like, wow, it snaps you out of whatever you were thinking and you're just present with it. That's how close what Sid realized was. And I think we create this idea of separation or distance or journey. And we create idols of people or experiences. Whereas I feel like Sid was constantly trying to just say to him, you're already enlightened, you just don't realize it. You're already built of consciousness, pure consciousness. You're already filled with that. And then we have this incredible gift of thought, mind, consciousness to create reality and life in 3D color. But we get lost in our own creations. I get lost in my own creations. Like another idea I'd had is when I've been around the principles long enough, I'm going to see this all the time. I'm never going to get caught out. I'm never going to blame the outside world or get upset or be judgmental. I was going to just love everyone all the time and be able to see beauty. And it's like, you know, that hasn't happened yet. And I'm not saying that's not possible. Like, I have no idea what the potential of humanity is or life is. But I know that any of the concepts I've created for myself, I've tripped over. Because I think at the beginning, I felt I had more of a handle of what the principles were to where I am now. Because I kind of had my concepts and my definitions of them. And I'm like, yeah, that's what they are. Whereas now they've just kind of expanded out to like, wow, they're just so much greater than any concept could hold. But I know that source, life, informs and guides and brings us. And it's freely given. Like whoever we are, whatever we've done, whatever beliefs we have about ourselves or our character or things that we're ashamed of or things that we think we should have done, there aren't any limits on what's given to us. The principles are this completely freely given gift. And it is like when I think it was actually Linda Pettit who said she'd been at the talk where Sid said the three principles are a metaphor for love. And then you see how easy it is to get hung up on a word. Like, I thought I knew what thought was when I met you 7 years ago, and you started speaking about thought in nature, thought within trees, thought within the intelligence of life, taking thought out of the human experience. I was like, wow, I have no idea what thought was. I just thought thought was kind of what we navigate life with. And I'd kind of limited it to a very human thing, whereas sister, these are universal principles. They're not reserved for humans. When you spoke about the intelligence within the chlorophyll cell and the sun, and you're like, and and that leaf has never touched the sun, but they work beautifully together. There's a knowledge that spans them. Like, that's the power of thought, mind, and consciousness. I remember just sitting there, and I'd heard that story so many times, and suddenly the relevance of it hit me. That really, in a way, the principles are pointing much more to the space than the form.
Mm.
That space that spans, the knowledge that spans a leaf and the sun, like that space. And I know that when Sydney Banks wrote The Missing Link, the publisher said to him, well, it could be a lot cheaper if we just kind of crammed it all in a bit more and had more on each page. And he's like, no, the space is really important. He knew that the space and the words really were just trying to point to something, but the space was more important. And I think that's the thing to remember with this. So often it'll be when we go away and have a cup of tea on the break, or go for a walk at lunchtime, or just sit back relaxing, something will come through us. We'll have an insight. We'll notice something about life that's new. And it's so often when we're not expecting it. But I just encourage people to not put a limit on what's possible for them because of who they think they are. Like, just recently, my friend who emigrated to America, her dad's now moving and she has to get rid of all of her things. So she's gifted me her guitar, which she knew I always loved. And I got gifted a new thought. Maybe I can learn the guitar. Whereas I've always been, I probably wouldn't be very good at it. I've tried before, I wasn't good at it. I could never be as good as my friend Rob. Like, just literally all of this noise that looks real and then influences our lives. And then suddenly like a fresh thought. And we've been back for a couple of weeks, and I've played it every day, and I've just seen little improvements. And because I've had the new thought of, wow, maybe I could be as good as Rob, it encourages me to practice. Whereas when I had the belief, well, I probably wouldn't be very good at that. And you see how sneaky and invisible they are. It seems true. I thought it looks true and real about me, so it's true. And when you start to realize that nothing that comes to mind as a reality for us is the truth, it's a potential within truth, we then feel freer to think again and again and again and again. And I found this beautiful video of a lady on, I think it was the America's Got Talent, and she'd become deaf at the age of 18, and she'd been a musician, and she stopped playing music and got quite depressed. And then I think she said at about 27, 28, she had the new thought, maybe I could learn in a new way. So she now learns to sing and play the guitar and the ukulele and loads of different instruments through wearing bare feet and feeling the vibration on the floor. And she was amazing, it was just amazing. And you see how we have so many ideas about what's possible for us, or someone else has told us what's possible. And if we've thought it long enough and it feels like it's become solid. But I feel like the principles almost sort of gives us that a moment of like, wow, maybe it isn't that solid. Maybe everything I believe to be true about myself and this world isn't solid, isn't true, it's up for grabs. And I'm not encouraging people to try and drop every single belief, or you can have beliefs, but I think you get to hold them a little bit lighter and be a bit more open. Like, I know that, I think it was Roger that used to say, you see a baby learning to walk, they fall down so many times. They don't just give up and go, right, I'm never going to be, I'm going to be the one that can never do it. They just keep trying. They keep getting back up. And I think we can get so discouraged by our own minds, and we get so caught up in our own creations. We forget that we are not what we've created, which is how we've got to experience so many different characters throughout our lives. Like I see, even over the last, I've just been asked to write a chapter for a book, and I was trying to kind of, she didn't want it in 3 principles language. She wanted it to be open for everyone. And it was about turning away from seriousness. What's happened since learning the principles and turning away from seriousness. And I think when I have that time of reflection, I see how much has changed. And things about my character that looked fixed and the principles hadn't impacted, suddenly they're not there anymore. And then you wonder how real any of them are.
That's when you start to see the nature, isn't it? And when you start to see the nature, you start to realize the nature of all reality, all experience. I like what you're saying about the books, because many of us pick up books and read books. We all have massive respect for the words, perhaps for the author, and for the words and the stories, the information. How often do we have deep respect for the paper, for the binding? Because without the paper and the binding, there would be no book for you to pick up and read. In any book you could write, in the same book, if you could have 1 million same books created, same size, same shapes, you could write 1 million stories. That's what's taking place. It's like life is one book with 1 million stories in it, billions of stories, trillions, infinite stories taking place within this magical book, because this is a magical book we're living in. We're mesmerized by the stories, we're mesmerized by the words, we're mesmerized by the pictures. Start to become aware of the book itself. Start to gain a respect for the book. The place on which these images, these words, these stories, these poems, these whatever are printed. That space. The place on which you could place infinite things, infinite knowledge, infinite pictures, all in one book. You don't pick up every single book and believe it. We don't trust every single thing that we read in every single book. Annette asked, can you find the name of that lady who sings?
Yes.
We'll type it into the thingy.
I think it's Amanda asking, but it says Annette on her screen.
Oh, it was Amanda. My apologies. I think one of the things I really wanted to say as well, if there's people here struggling to kind of feel like they're getting anywhere with the principles, I just want to say the fact that you're here means that you're ready. The fact that you come here and you're interested in this conversation or conversations of a similar ilk means that you're ready. You can't hear this until you are ready. It's not a judgment. No judgment in there whatsoever. It's just a fact. There are people you can explain this to who will just mean absolutely nothing to you, to them. They'll just say you're talking bollocks. They're not ready to hear it. They're attached to their world, their way of thinking, their way of seeing things. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not your place. It's It's not your place to change anybody. But when somebody shows up of free will, sits down in front of you and is prepared to listen, that person's ready. They might not know they're ready. They might be perhaps preparing to be ready, who knows? But the fact that you're all here means something very special. You are all aware that you're looking for something. Everybody's aware that they're looking for something. I'm looking for something, but I don't know what it is. That awareness of more, that awareness of, I know there's more to this life, to this beingness, to this existence. I know there's more. It's a beautiful fact that if you sat here, you're ready. You're ready to open up. And like I keep saying, there's no end to opening up. I felt myself over these last few weeks opening up more and more. I also, in the weeks before this, felt myself closing up. I want to be really kind of brutally honest about that stuff. When people come across this isn't you are not finding a tranquilizer for life. This is not a tranquilizer for life. If you're looking for anesthetic to life, that's what drugs are for. That's what alcohol's for. That's why people drink and take drugs. Because they're anesthetizing themselves to life. This isn't about that. This is not an anesthetic. This will not stop you from feeling. This will not stop you from experiencing. If anything, you will feel deeper. When you see injustice, you will feel it deeper. When you see kindness and love, I'm looking at Penny and a dog, God bless. I saw the way that dog was looking at you just before and it put a massive smile on my face, that love. You feel it deeper. You start to feel deeper. Your life becomes richer for it. The contrast within life becomes deeper and more beautiful. You realize that if you are feeling suffering, there is something for you to start to wake up to, some learning. Somewhere in that, you are seeing a duality in life. You're not seeing wholeness. One thing I don't want people to go away from this thinking is we're talking, oh, it's just your thinking. No, it's not just your thinking, it's reality. It's existence, and it's as real as it is until it moves on. It's real for the individual. It's real. Each moment is real. It shows up as reality. Everybody's reality is different, but everybody's reality is real to them. There's compassion born of that when we start to embrace that fact. A compassion which, when humanity really starts, when this really starts to take hold, and I reckon over the next few years, we're going to see a big change. When people start to come together and start to work as a unit, we're going to be present, we're going to see it. And those who aren't present will be present. When we see this world, I've been around this for 8 years, and I have seen just in the principles, the population of principles people in the UK just mushroom. That has to have an effect on society.
Well, it's the fact that we went to get our glass repaired on our car and left. It was at a service station, so you had to leave your car, and we went in to go and use the services, and we had Rust with us, so we knew that one of us had to wait outside. I come out and Dave's talking to this guy, talked to him for half an hour, and then he asked what we did, and he said, oh, we talk about the mind. And he said, oh, my friend does something like that. He teaches the 3 principles. And we're like, oh yeah, that's what we do. And then he's connected us with this guy, Dave. I don't know if he's on, actually. He might join us. But I was like, when I came across this in 2005, people just thought I was talking nonsense. And then suddenly you're just bumping into people who have come across it. And I used to know the different facilitators in the UK. I have not got an idea of who's teaching now and who's around this.
No.
The fact that it's in the prison system, it's in the school system. I know it's going into business, sporting performance. Like, it's I used to try and get books from Lone Pine, and it takes 3 months to ship them from Canada. And it
Yeah.
was, now there's just so many people that have written books and had insights, and it's completely taken off.
It can't be stopped. It cannot be stopped. Because, you know, everybody goes in this massive search for what they think they're looking for. People aren't aware everything that they do is an attempt to find peace, fulfillment, contentment, joy, love, connection. Everything we do, we go searching for it in work. When I get this job, if I get this job, it's going to sort me right out. I'm so happy. When I get that amount of money, oh, it'll be great. Get a new car, it's going to be great. That partner, when lockdown's over. We assume that all these events create experience. No, our experience creates the event. The way we live creates our life. To a massive degree, it creates what shows up in our lives, in the external as well. Consciousness is far more, has far more depth to it than what we currently understand. It has powers within it that we don't celebrate in the West. In fact, in a lot of respects, I feel like they've possibly been held back, quietened down, dumbed down. But there are gifts within consciousness to heal, to communicate, to intuit, to connect, that we're just starting to wake up to. It's nothing new. I look at Rusty, he knows. My friend Rusty's had a bit of a urinary problem. And what she said, we took her to see one of our friends who does herbs with dogs. And she said, she gave us a load of splints with these different essential oils on and some dandelion root powder and stuff like that. And she said, put these around the house. And if Rusty's interested in any of them, he'll go and sit by them. If she thinks it's going to help him heal. Anyway, so she said, just try this though for now. And she put dandelion root powder in my hand. And Rusty, the moment he smelt it, he was running up and he was like, and he ate it all. Dandelion root powder. He knew he needed it. He'd never come across dandelion powder before, root powder before. Nobody told him. He hadn't read the benefits. He hadn't read the side effects. He hadn't got all involved in all that fucking heady shit. He just ate it.
Until he didn't want it anymore.
Until he didn't want it anymore.
Which is unusual because he normally will just keep eating.
He'll just eat until he, we have to stop him from exploding every day. It's been hard work. It's 16th year this year. But if you look at animals, if I take Rusty for a walk or another dog for a walk, and those of us who have dogs, and we see them eating blades of grass, they sniff out the correct blade of grass, and they're very specific. I'll take that one, and they eat that blade of grass. I'll eat that one. They've never been taught it. Again, they've never read a book on foraging. Their awareness is so connected. It's not distracted by what they think they should be like, who they think they should be, what people have told them they are, or anything like that. They haven't got their minds cluttered with that nonsense that creates this illusory separation from our capacity to do that. What we have been told is possible and what we have been told is impossible. We've lived in a paradigm where healing has been poo-pooed and pharmaceuticals are the thing that heal people. What heals people is an immune system. Pharmaceuticals can be brilliant. Don't think I'm knocking the medical fraternity, please don't. But what actually does the healing is nature itself. We go to hospital to be healed. No, the body heals Our little son, nephew Archie's got has fractured his arm in the most terrible way. It was horrible. I would have fainted if I saw it in real life. I nearly fainted looking at a photograph. He goes to hospital, has it straightened out, but the body heals. It's the body, it's this innate intelligence that was already built into us. It's the thing that does the healing. We all know that the mind can make people ill. It's well known, it's well documented. People who live in high levels of stress, who think, and I want to stress this point, who think that stress is a problem, because apparently that's an actual factor. If you believe stress is a problem, as opposed to stress is useful, it helps me get work done. If you have, there's a difference. And what they came to the conclusion was that those who believe that stress is a problem, they're the ones that get ill. And those who believe that stress is a useful thing, it really helps me get my work done. There's a TEDx talk on it. This is somebody who's completely separate from the principles. Those that believe that stress is useful, they don't get ill. And she said, the difference that we can find whether people get ill through stress or not is a thought, is what she said. The difference is a thought. That's how powerful thought is. Thought can make you ill. Thought can stop your heart. Thought can kill you. Stress is thought. Well, does it not make logical sense then that thought can heal? Thought can also, the way we use the mind, can also has the capacity to heal. What we're talking about isn't a psychology. We're talking about the fundamental nature of nature itself. All nature, all nature, all nature is the same thing, showing up as a different expression, as a different character. You know, what people call karma is simply memories and habits. Clear your karma, people say. In Buddhism, they say clear your karma. Clear your karma. You can clear your karma in a moment. You will stop being revisited by the same circumstance, emotions, and feelings the moment you clear your karma. The only thing that's holding your karma prisoner is yourself. Karma isn't something like, life isn't a bitch, and karma's not a bitch. Karma's not out to get you. What people call karma is memories that we carry through time, that we keep on experiencing over and over again because we're so wedded to them. Whether it's guilt, whether it's anxieties or worries or cans or cannots, this will revisit over and over again because the mind creates reality, and whatever the mind is thinking, it experiences. It experiences as a reality. To clear these patterns, to clear these habits, to work on them is fruitless. Most people have discovered that because people come to us and they say, how long have you been working on yourself? 20, 30 years. How's it going? Pretty crap. What are you trying to fix? Have you ever considered what you're trying to fix was never broken? Have you ever considered that what you were trying to fix was never broken in the first place? It has the appearance of being broken. But that appearance can change in a moment. And it does. Perhaps we're not aware of that. I remember when I used to suffer with depression, I've got a distinct memory of sitting down and watching a film and laughing my head off. I was diagnosed with depression and I would have it for the rest of my life, I was told. I would find ways to deal with it. That was what I was told by psychiatry. They couldn't have been more wrong. God bless them. They couldn't be more wrong. Talking about my problems, looking at my problems, trying to solve my problems, never solved any problems. It just kept them as an experience within my life. It kept my karma alive, if you want to call it that. The thing that cleared it was a spontaneous realization of something far deeper, which is the only thing that anybody ultimately is. Sorry if you can hear Rusty snoring again. It's the only thing that we truly are, because what we're truly not is a story of what we think we are, or what we've been told we are, or our character. Characters change all the time. They change moment to moment. Sometimes I'm pissed off. Sometimes I'm happy as Larry. Sometimes I'm like totally intrigued by something. My character is in a constant state of change. Bang, 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 bang. Yeah, there's habits. But they're just like the words in a book. The words are ever changing. But what I'm interested in, and what I kind of find myself more drawn to now, is the book itself. The source. To actually start to ponder and contemplate, perhaps there is a source. It's a beautiful place to start. Perhaps there is a source. If we could start there, perhaps there is a source to experience. Perhaps life isn't just some random thing that I'm walking through. We think we walk through life. No, life walks through you. We think we walk through reality. No, reality walks through you. We create it. We are the creators of life, of reality, of experience, from birth till death, and beyond, and before.
And I think you also gain a lot of respect for how real it is for us. Like a really silly example is last week, David got fed up with me banging on about we need other people to help with this part of our van, and everyone giving him advice about we're converting a van into a camper. And he'd gone off to help my uncle build a fence. And then all day he hadn't got back to messages or answered his phone. I was like, well, that's unusual. So I'd already thought, oh, maybe he's in a mood. So that's what I lived in all day, that maybe Dave was in a mood. And then I saw him get back, and I'd made like a juice. So I went and got it out the fridge. And then I looked out the window and I saw him get back in the van and drive off again. And my dad also saw him. We're like, oh, that was weird. And I'm like, oh, maybe he's gone to get some alcohol-free beers. Maybe he's gone to the lake. Maybe he's in a really bad mood. Maybe he's gone home. Maybe my mind kept creating on that. And then about an hour and a half later, Dave got back and I said, how you doing? He said, all right. I said, where have you been? He goes, oh, I've been at your uncle's. I was like, yeah, but where have you just been? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, we saw you get back about an hour and a half ago and then drive off again. And he was like, no, I didn't. And me and my dad were like, well, we saw you through the very mottled glass. Oh, actually, hang on a minute. You're wearing a grey t-shirt. That person was wearing a red t-shirt. And it was like the weirdest thing, because my reality was so fixed on you coming home and then driving off in a mood. And not, oh, and yeah, by the way, I left my phone in your auntie's car when we'd gone to get some stuff for the fencing, and I've only just picked it up. And it's like you get to see again and again. I created a whole day of story around these ideas, and none of it was true. David had a lovely day, was in a wonderful mood.
I didn't realize that, yeah.
And it was just, and I think you start to get a respect for the nature of this stuff, and you go easy on yourself. Like, it looks so real to me. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't make it up all the, but if you get onto the trick of it, like, it didn't ruin my day. I just had all of this stuff running through. But you can see how one untruth, one idea that isn't true, all of these other thoughts come from it. It completely multiplies the amount of thinking that you do. And then one truth,
it's very convincing,
flattened everything. No, I've been at your uncle's and I left my phone in the car. Oh, and you're like, so all of the thinking I'd done, all of the ideas I'd come up with were completely gone. I didn't have to work on them. They just vanished because I saw the truth of something. And I think that's what starts to happen more and more. We start to see the stories we create in our own mind and how real they look.
They become visible.
But you kind of have a bit of perspective on them. And then you're open to listen. Because I think probably in the past, I would have argued that I had been right and he had turned up and driven off again. I would have probably argued that as much as I could.
Breakdown?
brew time.
Brew time. 15 minutes.
So if we come back at 1/4 to the hour,